The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Dakota. Captain Jake Morrison had been staring at them for 3 hours now, watching the endless dance of light against the black void. Out here on the edge of human space, things were quiet. Too quiet for his liking. Jake was a tall man with graying hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded patrol ships for 12 years, keeping the peace along the outer colonies. Most days brought nothing, but routine scans and supply runs. He preferred it that way. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station. Her voice cut through the bridge's quiet hum. "I'm getting something strange on the emergency channels." Jake turned from the viewport, his boots clicking against the metal deck as he walked over to her station. Amy was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had joined his crew 6 months ago, fresh from the academy. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the screen. Amy's fingers moved across her controls, adjusting frequencies and signal filters. "It's coming from way out past the rim, really far out, and it's not in any language our computers recognize at first." The speakers crackled with static, then a voice came through. It was high-pitched and musical, speaking words that sounded like singing mixed with whispers. The universal translator kicked in a few seconds later, turning the alien sounds into broken English. "Please, distant ones of the star roads, we have heard whispers of your kind, humans who walk between worlds." Jake felt his spine stiffen. First contact situations were serious business. He had protocols to follow, reports to file, but something in that voice made him hesitate. There was fear in it. Real fear. The message continued, crackling through space across impossible distances. "Our people face extinction. The Korath Empire comes with ships that blot out our suns. We offer all we have. Our art, our knowledge, our very souls. If you will show mercy to a dying race." Amy looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Captain, this is from the Kepler 442 system. That's almost 200 light years from here. How did they even know about us?" Jake rubbed his jaw, thinking hard. Humans had been exploring space for 50 years now, but they had only met a few alien species. Most were friendly traders or isolationists who wanted nothing to do with Earth. But everyone had heard stories about the Korath. The Korath Empire was bad news. They were bugs, basically. Giant insects that had learned to build starships and wage war. They consumed everything in their path, turning entire worlds into resource farms. Human intelligence said they had wiped out at least 3 civilizations in the past 10 years. "Keep recording everything," Jake told Amy. "And send a priority message back to Terra Command. They need to hear this." The alien voice came through, again weaker now. The signal was breaking up as the distance and interference took their toll. "We are the Valians. We have watched the stars for 1,000 years in peace, but peace means nothing to those who bring only death. Please, if there is mercy in your hearts, remember us when we are gone." Then the transmission cut to static. Jake stood there for a long moment, staring at the communications panel. Amy was already working on the message to Terra Command, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The rest of the bridge crew had heard everything. They all knew what this meant. 2 days later, Jake found himself in a secure briefing room at Terra Defense Command on Earth. The room was deep underground, protected by layers of armor and electromagnetic shielding. Admiral Lisa Hayes sat across from him at a long metal table. She was a tough woman in her 50s, with short gray hair and scars on her hands from her days as a ship engineer. "Tell me about this message again, Captain Morrison," Admiral Hayes said, her voice all business. Jake activated the holographic display in the center of the table. The alien transmission played again, the musical voice pleading across the stars. When it finished, the room fell silent. Admiral Hayes tapped her fingers on the table. "Intelligence confirms the Korath are moving in that direction. A full war fleet, maybe 200 ships. They'll reach the Kepler system in about 6 weeks." "What about the Valians?" Jake asked. "Do we know anything about them?" Hayes pulled up another display. It showed long-range sensor data and intercepted communications. Peaceful species. No military to speak of. They build art and study philosophy. Never had a war in their recorded history. Jake studied the information. The Valians looked almost human, but taller and thinner. Their skin was pale blue and their eyes were large and expressive. Their cities were works of art, with flowing architecture that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being built on it. They won't last 5 minutes against the Korath, Jake said quietly. No, they won't, Hayes agreed. The question is, what do we do about it? Around the table sat other high-ranking officers from different branches of the military. General Paul Carter from the Marine Corps looked uncomfortable. Colonel Sandra Bell from Fleet Intelligence was reading through classified reports on her tablet. Kepler 442 is 200 light-years away, General Carter said, shaking his head. Outside our territory, no strategic value, and we'd be picking a fight with the Korath Empire. That's not a smart move. Colonel Bell looked up from her tablet. The Korath have been expanding toward our space anyway. They're going to be a problem eventually. Maybe it's better to deal with them now, on our terms. Admiral Hayes studied the star charts floating above the table. The Kepler system was marked in blue, surrounded by the red zones that showed Korath space. It looked very small and very far away. There's another issue, Hayes said slowly. How? Did the Valians know about us? Our exploration ships have never been that far out. Someone or something told them humans exist. That made everyone in the room think hard. If aliens they had never met knew about Earth, then human space wasn't as secret as they thought. Other species were watching them, talking about them. Jake cleared his throat. Admiral, with respect, that message wasn't just asking for help. It was asking for mercy. These people are going to die, and they know it. Hayes looked at him with tired eyes. Captain, we can't save everyone in the galaxy. We barely have enough ships to protect our own colonies. But we could try, Jake said. Send a small force. Maybe we can't save all of them, but we could make the Korath pay a price for their expansion. The room fell quiet again. Everyone knew the numbers. The Korath had thousands of ships and trillions of soldiers. Humanity had maybe 300 combat vessels and a few million trained military personnel. In a straight fight, humans would lose badly. But General Carter was looking at something on his tablet and his expression was changing. There might be another option, he said slowly. Admiral Hayes raised an eyebrow. What kind of option? Carter glanced around the room, making sure everyone had the proper security clearance. Luna Base 7, the enhanced program. Hayes's face went very still. Several officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The enhanced program was classified at the highest levels. Most people in the military had never heard of it. The enhanced have been in stasis for 2 years, Hayes said quietly. They're not supposed to be used except for extreme circumstances. A potential war with the Korath Empire sounds pretty extreme to me, Carter replied. Jake looked back and forth between them, confused. What's the enhanced program? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated the security locks on the briefing room. Red lights flashed as the room sealed itself off from the rest of the base. Captain Morrison, she said, what I'm about to tell you is classified beyond your current clearance level. But if we're going to do this, you need to understand what we're really talking about. She brought up new files on the holographic display. Jake saw medical records, psychological evaluations, and combat footage that made his stomach turn. During the Titan Wars, we created soldiers who were more than human. Genetic enhancement, cybernetic implants, psychological conditioning. They were designed to be the perfect weapons. Jake stared at the images floating in front of him. The enhanced looked human, but something in their eyes was wrong. They moved too fast, hit too hard, and showed no emotion even in the middle of combat. They won the war for us, Hayes continued. But afterwards we realized we had created something we couldn't control, something that wasn't quite human anymore. General Carter leaned forward. The Valians asked for mercy, but mercy isn't what they need. They need someone to make the Korath afraid, and the enhanced are very good at making people afraid. Admiral Hayes looked around the table one more time. If we do this, We're not sending a rescue mission. We're sending hunters. The Valians wanted mercy, but they're going to get monsters instead. Our monsters. The room was silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. Outside, Earth turned peacefully in space, unaware that its leaders were about to unleash something terrible on a distant star system. Jake thought about the musical voice in that transmission, pleading across the void for someone to care about, their dying world. He thought about the Korath fleet, approaching like a swarm of locusts. And he thought about what humanity had become in order to survive in a galaxy full of threats. "When do we leave?" he asked quietly. Luna Base 7 sat on the dark side of Earth's moon, hidden from telescopes and prying eyes. The facility looked like any other research station from the outside, but Captain Jake Morrison knew better now. As his shuttle approached the landing pad, he could see the defensive turrets and energy shields that protected this place from unwanted visitors. Colonel Ryan Brooks met Jake at the airlock. Brooks was a thin man with pale skin and nervous eyes that never seemed to rest in one place for long. His uniform was perfectly pressed, but his hands shook slightly when he spoke. "Welcome to Luna Base 7, Captain Morrison," Brooks said as they walked through sterile white corridors. "I hope Admiral Hayes explained what you're going to see here." Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure anything could have prepared him for this. She mentioned the enhanced program, said they were created during the Titan Wars. Brooks stopped walking and turned to face him. "Captain, what we did here changed everything about human warfare. We took volunteers and turned them into something that isn't quite human anymore. They're faster, stronger, and smarter than any normal person. But the cost..." He shook his head. The cost was their humanity. They took an elevator down 20 levels, past security checkpoints that scanned everything from fingerprints to brain waves. The deeper they went, the more Jake felt like he was descending into something dark and forbidden. "How many enhanced are there?" Jake asked as they walked down another corridor lined with thick metal doors. 43 active units, Brooks replied. "We started with over 300 volunteers. The process didn't work for everyone." Jake didn't ask what happened to the ones it didn't work for. He had a feeling he didn't want to know. They stopped in front of the observation window that looked into a large training room. Inside, Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. A man was moving through a combat course, but he moved like no human Jake had ever seen. He was fast, impossibly fast, flowing from target to target like liquid death. The man was tall and lean with pale skin marked by surgical scars. His eyes glowed with a soft amber light that was clearly artificial. He wore simple black training clothes, but every movement he made was perfect, calculated, efficient. "That's Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner," Brooks said quietly. "Alpha Squad leader. He's been enhanced for 8 years now." Jake watched as Turner completed the course in what must have been record time. The targets were destroyed with precise strikes. Each one hit exactly where it would cause maximum damage. But what disturbed Jake most was Turner's expression. There was no emotion there at all, just cold focus. "What did you do to them?" Jake asked. Brooks pulled up a tablet and showed Jake medical charts and surgical records. Genetic modifications to increase muscle density and bone strength, cybernetic implants to speed up reflexes and neural processing, chemical treatments to enhance healing and reduce the need for sleep. The list went on and on. New organs, artificial glands, replacement joints made of advanced metals. Jake realized he was looking at the blueprints for turning a human being into a living weapon. But the psychological changes were the most significant, Brooks continued. "We had to modify their brain chemistry to handle the stress of enhanced combat. The result is that they feel emotions differently now. Fear, guilt, mercy. These things are muted in them." In the training room, Turner had finished the course and was standing perfectly still, waiting for new orders. He didn't seem tired or even slightly out of breath. "Can I talk to him?" Jake asked. Brooks hesitated. "They're different, Captain. Don't expect a normal conversation." A few minutes later, Jake found himself face to face with Alex Turner in a small briefing room. Up close, the enhanced soldier was even more unsettling. His amber eyes tracked every movement Jake made with predatory focus. His breathing was so controlled it was barely noticeable, Lieutenant Commander Turner, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm Captain Morrison. I understand you and your team might be deployed on a special mission. Turner tilted his head slightly, studying Jake like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. When he spoke, his voice was calm and emotionless. The mission parameters have not been fully briefed yet, Captain, but we are ready for deployment. What do you know about the Korath Empire? Jake asked. Turner's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his glowing eyes. Insectoid species, militaristic expansionist society, average height, 1.8 meters, exoskeleton provides natural armor. Weak points include joint connections and respiratory openings. Standard tactics involve overwhelming numerical superiority. The way he described potential enemies like they were just data points made Jake's skin crawl. This wasn't a soldier talking about a battle. This was a predator analyzing prey. The aliens we're trying to help are called Valians, Jake said. They're peaceful. They've never had a war. Turner nodded once. Understood. Civilian population. Protection protocols will be observed where tactically feasible. Where tactically feasible. Jake heard the unspoken message in those words. The enhanced would save civilians if they could, but their primary mission would always come first. Brooks led Jake to another observation area, where he could see more of the enhanced soldiers. Sergeant Maya Rodriguez was practicing with weapons that seemed to appear and disappear from her hands. Her movements were fluid and silent like a deadly dancer. Corporal Nick Johnson was working with explosives, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to handle dangerous compounds that would terrify normal humans. He had a slight smile on his face as he worked, which somehow made him more frightening than Turner's emotionless expression. Private Danny White was the youngest looking of the group, probably in his early 20s before the modifications. But his eyes held the same cold focus as the others. He was studying tactical displays and enemy movement patterns with the intensity of a machine. How do they work together? Jake asked, watching the squad move through coordinated exercises. Their neural implants allow them to share data in real time, Brooks explained. They can communicate without speaking, coordinate attacks with perfect timing, and adapt to changing situations faster than any normal military unit. Jake saw Turner raise his hand slightly, and immediately the other three enhanced soldiers shifted their positions. No words were spoken, no signals that Jake could see, but they moved like parts of a single organism. They're not just soldiers anymore, Jake realized. There's something else entirely. Brooks nodded grimly. The enhanced were created to win humanity's wars. And they did. During the Titan Rebellion, they ended conflicts that had been going on for years. But afterwards, we realized we had created something we couldn't control. What do you mean? Brooks pulled up incident reports on his tablet. Jake read accounts of enhanced soldiers who couldn't adjust to peacetime, who saw threats everywhere, who struggled to interact with normal humans without their combat protocols kicking in. They need to fight, Brooks said quietly. It's what they were designed for. Take away their missions and they start to break down psychologically. The stasis chambers help, but they're not a permanent solution. In the training area, the enhanced squad was running through close combat exercises. They moved with a speed and precision that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each strike was calculated to disable or kill with maximum efficiency. What happened during the Titan Wars? Jake asked. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. The Titan colonies had declared independence from Earth. It turned into a bloody conflict that lasted 3 years. Normal soldiers were dying by the thousands. So we created the Enhanced. He activated a holographic display that showed battle footage from the war. Jake watched enhanced soldiers moving through enemy positions like ghosts, eliminating resistance, with surgical precision. They turned the tide in 6 months, Brooks continued, but the way they fought, it wasn't warfare anymore. It was extermination. The Titan rebels surrendered not because they were beaten, but because they were terrified. Jake understood now why the Enhanced had been locked away on Luna Base 7. They were too effective, too dangerous. They had won humanity's war, but at the cost of becoming something that normal humans feared. And now we're going to unleash "Them on the Korath," Jake said. Brooks nodded. "The Valians asked for mercy, but mercy won't save them from the Korath Empire. Only monsters can stop other monsters." Turner appeared in the doorway, moving with that unsettling, silent precision. "Colonel Brooks, the squad is ready for mission briefing." Jake looked at the enhanced soldier and tried to see the man he used to be, but there was nothing left of that person in those glowing amber eyes. Turner was a weapon now, nothing more and nothing less. "The mission is approved," Brooks told Turner. "You'll be deployed to the Kepler 442 system. Hostile force is the Korath invasion fleet. Rules of engagement are flexible." Turner nodded once. "Understood, Colonel. When do we deploy?" "Tomorrow," Brooks replied. "The UES Vengeance will transport you to the target system." After Turner left, Jake stood in the observation area watching the enhanced soldiers prepare their equipment. They worked with mechanical efficiency, checking weapons and gear with the same emotionless focus they brought to everything else. "Are we doing the right thing?" Jake asked quietly. The Korath invasion fleet appeared in the Kepler 442 system like a plague of metal locusts. General Thractor watched the beautiful blue and green world grow larger on his command screen and felt satisfaction deep in his insectoid brain. This would be an easy conquest. Thractor was massive even for a Korath, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His black exoskeleton was scarred from a dozen battles, and his forearms moved with mechanical precision as he studied the tactical displays. Behind his compound eyes, a mind shaped by millions of years of evolution calculated the most efficient way to strip this world of resources. "Defense platforms detected," reported his tactical officer, a smaller Korath whose carapace still gleamed with youth. 12 orbital stations, primitive energy weapons. Thractor clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his species. 12 stations against 200 ships. These Valians are even weaker than intelligence suggested. The first wave of Korath ships swept toward the planet like a dark tide. Their weapons began firing long before the Valians could mount any effective response. The orbital defense platforms tried to fight back, their energy beams lancing out toward the invasion fleet, but they might as well have been throwing rocks at a hurricane. On the planet below, Elder Zarath stood in the council chambers of the capital city, watching the sky burn through the great crystal windows. She was tall and graceful like all her people, her pale blue skin almost translucent in the light. Her large dark eyes held a sadness that seemed to encompass her entire dying race. "The defense platforms are destroyed," reported Commander Veltar, the closest thing the Valians had to a military leader. His voice shook with fear and disbelief. "All 12 stations, gone in less than an hour." Around the council chamber, other Valian leaders sat in stunned silence. They had known this day would come, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Their peaceful civilization had no answer for this kind of violence. "Are we still transmitting the distress signals?" Zarath asked quietly. "Yes, Elder," replied the communications officer. "We're broadcasting on all frequencies, but we've received no response. The humans either didn't get our message, or they chose not to help." Zarath closed her eyes and felt the weight of her people's extinction settling on her shoulders. The Korath would show no mercy. They never did. Within days, perhaps hours, Valian civilization would be nothing but a memory. Above the planet, the first Korath landing ships began their descent. Each vessel carried 1,000 soldiers bred for warfare, their bodies designed by evolution and genetic manipulation to be perfect killers. They had no fear, no mercy, and no purpose beyond destroying everything that stood in their path. General Thractor watched the deployment from his flagship with cold satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly according to plan. By tomorrow, the primary cities would be under Korath control. By next week, the entire planet would be nothing but resource extraction sites and slave camps. But far beyond the edge of the system, hidden in the shadow of a dead moon, the UES Vengeance waited and watched. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the stealth frigate, studying the tactical displays with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Korath fleet was massive, more ships than intelligence had predicted. The destruction of the Valian defenses had been swift and brutal. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. They're not even trying to minimize civilian casualties. On the main screen, they could see Korath landing craft descending toward Valian cities like falling hammers. Energy weapons lit up the night sky as the aliens began their systematic conquest. How long until the enhanced are ready to deploy? Jake asked. Colonel Brooks checked his tablet. They're in the drop pods now, running final system checks. 5 minutes, maybe less. Jake had seen the enhanced preparing for their mission, and the site would stay with him forever. They had moved through their pre-deployment routine with mechanical efficiency, checking weapons and equipment that looked more like torture devices than military gear. Alex Turner had briefed his team on the mission parameters, his glowing amber eyes showing no emotion as he described their targets. Maya Rodriguez had tested her adaptive camouflage, becoming nearly invisible even in the bright lights of the cargo bay. Nick Johnson had smiled that unsettling smile as he armed his explosive devices. Danny White had run diagnostic checks on his neural interface weapons with the focus of a surgeon. They weren't going to save the Valians, they were going to hunt the Korath. "Sir," called the tactical officer, "I'm detecting movement in the landing zone Alpha. Korath forces are establishing a command post near the northern continent." Jake studied the display. Thousands of Korath soldiers were spreading out from their landing ships, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a hive mind. Supply lines were being established, defensive positions were being built, and civilian populations were being rounded up for processing. "That's where we hit them," Colonel Brooks said quietly. "Away from the main population centers, where the enhanced can work without worrying about civilian casualties. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear the enhanced running through their final checks." Turner's voice came through clear and emotionless, reporting readiness status like a machine reading out technical specifications. "Drop. Pods armed and ready for launch," he said. "All systems green. Awaiting deployment order." Jake looked at the tactical display one more time. Down on the planet, the Korath were beginning their work of extermination. The Valians were dying by the thousands, their peaceful civilization crumbling under the weight of superior firepower. "Launch the pods," Jake ordered quietly. 4 small objects dropped from the Vengeance's belly, falling toward the planet like dark stars. They were painted matte black to avoid detection, and their heat signatures were masked by advanced stealth technology. To the Korath sensors, they would look like debris from the battle if they were noticed at all. The pods entered the atmosphere on the night side of the planet, their paths calculated to bring them down in the wilderness far from any Korath positions. Advanced navigation systems guided them through the darkness, avoiding detection as they streaked toward their target zone. Inside the pods, the enhanced soldiers waited with the patience of predators. Their enhanced physiology meant they felt no discomfort from the high-speed descent, no fear of the coming impact. They were focused entirely on the mission ahead. Turner's pod hit the ground first, in a small forest clearing 30 kilometers from the nearest Korath position. The impact would have killed a normal human, but Turner stepped out of the smoking crater without even being jarred. His enhanced senses immediately began cataloging the environment, analyzing threats and opportunities with superhuman efficiency. Maya Rodriguez landed 2 kilometers to the east, her pod crushing through the canopy of alien trees before embedding itself in the forest floor. She emerged from the wreckage like a ghost, her adaptive camouflage already adjusting to match the local terrain. Nick Johnson's pod came down near a rocky outcrop, the explosion of his landing masked by the natural acoustics of the canyon walls. He checked his demolitions gear with the care of an artist preparing his brushes. Danny White landed last, his pod striking the ground in a meadow filled with strange alien flowers. As he stepped out into the night air, his neural interface weapons began scanning for enemy communication frequencies. Within minutes, all 4 enhanced soldiers were moving through the darkness toward their target. They communicated through their neural links, sharing data and coordinating their approach without speaking a word. To any observer, they would have seemed like shadows given deadly purpose. 20 kilometers away, the Korath forces were settling into their new conquest. Supply convoys moved between landing sites carrying equipment and prisoners. Guard posts had been established at strategic points, Command centers buzzed with activity as officers planned the next phase of the invasion. General Thraktor reviewed the progress reports with satisfaction. Resistance had been minimal, casualties among his forces almost non-existent. The Valians had proven to be even weaker than expected. By this time tomorrow, the major population centers would be under complete Korath control. But in the darkness beyond his perimeter, something was moving that he could not have imagined in his worst nightmares. The enhanced soldiers approached, the Korath positions like a disease moving through healthy tissue, silent and invisible until the moment they struck. Turner reached the outer edge of the Korath perimeter first. His enhanced vision could see the alien sentries moving in their patrol patterns, their insectoid forms visible even in the darkness. He studied their movements, analyzed their blind spots, and calculated the most efficient approach routes. Through his neural link, he shared this data with his team. Maya received targeting information for the communication arrays. Nick got structural analysis of the supply depots. Danny was given frequencies for the enemy command network. The Enhanced didn't just fight battles. They studied their enemies. Like scientists, learned their weaknesses like hunters, and then exploited those weaknesses with surgical precision. The first Korath sentry died without ever knowing he was in danger. Maya Rodriguez moved behind him like a shadow. The first Korath supply convoy vanished at dawn. Major Krikta had been expecting the convoy for 2 hours when his communications officer reported they had lost contact. The convoy carried ammunition and medical supplies for the forward positions, and it was traveling on a secure route between established checkpoints. "Send a patrol to investigate," Krikta ordered, his mandibles clicking with irritation. The Korath major was experienced in conquest operations, having participated in the destruction of 7 different worlds. Delays like this were unusual and unwelcome. The patrol found the convoy vehicles 3 kilometers from the supply depot. The trucks were intact but empty. No bodies, no signs of battle, no indication of what had happened to the 40 Korath soldiers who should have been inside. What the patrol did find made even hardened Korath warriors step backward in fear. The Oaim. Missing soldiers were arranged in a perfect circle around the lead truck. Their bodies had been positioned with mathematical precision, each one facing outward as if standing guard. But they were all dead, killed with such efficiency that most showed no signs of struggle. How were they killed? Major Krikta asked when the patrol leader made his report. The patrol leader, a young Korath whose exoskeleton still showed the bright patterns of youth, struggled to find words. We cannot tell, sir. No weapon marks, no burns. They just stopped working." What the Korath didn't understand was that Maya Rodriguez had done this work in less than 5 minutes. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to move faster than their eyes could track, and her modified hands could strike with precision that turned their own exoskeletons against them. A single touch to the right nerve cluster could shut down a Korath's nervous system instantly, but the Enhanced weren't just killing Korath soldiers. They were sending a message. That afternoon, a guard post on the eastern perimeter went silent during routine check-in. When a relief team arrived, they found the facility completely intact. All the equipment was undamaged. All the weapons were still in their racks. All the supplies were untouched. The guards were missing. 2 hours later, a Korath patrol found them. The 12 soldiers had been arranged in a complex geometric pattern in a clearing half a kilometer from their post. The pattern meant nothing to Korath minds, but it triggered deep, primal fears that their species had carried since they were simple insects hiding from predators. Nick Johnson had spent considerable time creating that pattern. His enhanced mind understood the psychological impact of precise arrangements, the way certain shapes and angles could trigger fear responses in different species. He was turning killing into an art form. General Thraktor received the reports in his command ship with growing unease. 2 incidents might be coincidence. Equipment failure, perhaps, or some kind of local disease affecting his troops. But the arranged body suggested something else entirely. Increase security patrols, he ordered his staff. Double the guards at all installations, and send out hunter-killer teams to search for whatever is doing this. But Thraktor's hunters were about to become hunted. Danny White intercepted the general's orders through the Korath communication network. His neural interface weapons had completely penetrated their command structure, allowing him to monitor every transmission, every order, every report. He knew where the hunter teams would be deployed before they left their bases. The first hunter team consisted of 20 elite Korath soldiers, specially trained for tracking and eliminating threats. They moved through the forest in perfect formation, their enhanced senses scanning for any sign of the enemy. These were not ordinary troops but the Korath equivalent of special forces. They never saw Alex Turner coming. Turner had been watching them for an hour, studying their movement patterns and tactical procedures. His enhanced vision could track them even in complete darkness, and his modified nervous system allowed him to move without making any sound. The attack lasted 30 seconds. Turner moved through the Korath formation like death given form. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to strike multiple targets before any of them could react. His modified hands could punch through their exoskeletons as easily as a normal human could break paper. When it was over, 20 elite Korath warriors lay dead in the forest. But Turner didn't leave them arranged in patterns like the others. He left them where they fell, scattered and broken, a message that said even their best soldiers were nothing to him. By the third day, panic was spreading through the Korath invasion force. Convoys traveled only in large groups with heavy escorts. Guard posts were reinforced and connected by constant communication checks. Patrols moved in formations designed to prevent ambush. None of it mattered. The Enhanced adapted to every countermeasure faster than the Korath could implement them. When the aliens increased their patrol sizes, Maya Rodriguez simply waited for larger groups to eliminate. When they improved their communication protocols, Danny White found new ways to infiltrate their networks. When they reinforced their positions, Nick Johnson found more creative ways to destroy them. But the psychological warfare was having an even greater effect than the direct attacks. The Korath were a species that had evolved from hive insects. They were used to facing enemies that fought according to predictable patterns that could be overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. They had never encountered anything like the Enhanced. Reports began filtering in from across the invasion zone. A supply depot destroyed by explosions that came from inside the building, triggered by devices no one had seen being placed. Guard posts found empty. Their occupants vanished without any sign of struggle or alarm. Communication arrays disabled by intrusions that left no trace in their security systems. The Korath soldiers began to fear the darkness. They stayed close together, jumped at shadows, and reported threats that investigation teams could never find. The efficient war machine that had conquered dozens of worlds was slowly coming apart, under the pressure of fighting an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Major Krikta found himself in command of a supply base that had lost half its personnel in 5 days. The missing soldiers had simply vanished during routine duties, leaving behind only their equipment and growing fear among the survivors. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving reports from all sectors. The pattern is the same everywhere. Small units disappearing, installations being destroyed, communication networks being compromised." Krikta studied the tactical displays with mounting dread. The red markers showing lost units formed a pattern that was closing in around the main Korath positions like a tightening noose. "What kind of enemy can do this?" the major muttered to himself. His question was answered that night when Nick Johnson visited the supply base. The Enhanced soldier approached the facility like a predator studying prey. His enhanced senses mapped every defensive position, every patrol route, every weakness in their security. The Korath had built their base according to standard military doctrine, which made it predictable. Johnson didn't attack the base directly. Instead, he began a campaign of psychological terror that turned the facility into a trap for its own occupants. First, he disabled the perimeter sensors in a pattern that created blind spots in their detection grid. The guards knew something was wrong, but they couldn't find the problem. Fear began to spread as soldiers reported movement in areas their sensors said were clear. Then he began manipulating their communication systems. Messages would arrive claiming to be from missing units, transmissions would cut out at crucial moments, and emergency alarms would trigger without apparent cause. The Korath soldiers began to distrust their own equipment. Finally, he started visiting the guards themselves. Johnson would appear just long enough for a sentry to catch a glimpse of movement, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. He would leave small objects in places where guards would find them, items that had belonged to missing soldiers. He would trigger sounds that seemed to come from empty corridors and shadows that moved when they should have been still. Within 48 hours, the supply base was in chaos. Soldiers refused to stand guard duty alone, officers couldn't trust their own reports, and the entire facility was paralyzed by fear of an enemy they had never clearly seen. Major Krikta finally requested permission to abandon the base, reporting that his position was no longer defensible, but General Thraktor's response was swift and angry. "Retreat is not acceptable," the general transmitted. "You are Korath warriors, not frightened insects. Hold your position and eliminate these threats." But Thrakta's own flagship was beginning to experience problems. Maya Rodriguez had spent 2 days studying the massive command ship, learning its layout and security procedures. Her adaptive camouflage allowed her to move through the vessel, like a ghost, invisible to both sensors and organic eyes. She didn't attack the ship's crew directly. Instead, she began sabotaging systems in ways that would create maximum confusion. Navigation computers developed mysterious errors, life support systems experienced unexplained fluctuations, and security cameras began showing recordings from empty rooms where movement sensors detected nothing. The ship's officers found themselves chasing technical problems that seemed to multiply faster than they could be solved. The Korath forces gathered at their primary landing zone like wounded animals seeking shelter. General Thraktor watched from his command ship as thousands of his soldiers retreated from positions across the continent, abandoning their conquest, to huddle together in what they hoped was safety. The landing zone covered 50 square kilometers of flat plains near the Valian capital city. Massive defensive walls had been constructed around the perimeter. Energy shields hummed with power, and automated weapon systems tracked every shadow beyond the fortifications. If there was any place the Korath could make a stand against their invisible enemy, this was it. Thraktor studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Whatever had been hunting his forces would have to reveal itself now. The concentrated firepower of his remaining troops would eliminate any threat that dared to approach their stronghold. "Status report," the general commanded. Major Krikta consulted his datapad with shaking hands. The officer's exoskeleton bore stress fractures from days of constant fear. 12,000 soldiers within the perimeter, sir. All heavy weapons are operational, shields are at full power, and air patrols are maintaining constant surveillance. It sounded impressive, but Thraktor knew the real numbers. He had begun this invasion with nearly 50,000 troops. In just 1 week, something had reduced his force by more than half without ever engaging in direct battle. But surely this nightmare was almost over. No enemy, no matter how skilled, could penetrate defenses this strong. 3 kilometers away, hidden in the ruins of a Valian observatory, Alex Turner watched the Korath fortifications through enhanced vision that could see every detail with perfect clarity. His amber eyes showed no emotion as he studied the defensive positions, calculating angles of attack and identifying weak points. Through his neural link, he shared tactical data with his team. Maya Rodriguez was positioned on the eastern approach, her adaptive camouflage making her invisible among the rubble of a destroyed city. Nick Johnson had found a perfect vantage point to the south, where damaged buildings provided both cover and elevated firing positions. Danny White remained mobile, his electronic warfare equipment already penetrating the Korath communication networks. The Enhanced had spent 3 days preparing for this final assault. They had mapped every defensive system, identified every patrol pattern, and calculated the exact timing needed to maximize their effectiveness. This wouldn't be a battle in any traditional sense. It would be the surgical removal of a cancer. Turner's enhanced mind processed thousands of tactical variables in seconds. The Korath had made their fortress strong against conventional attacks, but they still thought like insects. They expected enemies to approach from predictable directions, to announce themselves with obvious movements, to fight according to rules they could understand. They were about to learn that humans had evolved beyond such limitations. The attack began at midnight. Danny White struck first, his neural interface weapon sending cascading failures through the Korath computer systems. Defense grids went offline in carefully planned sequences, creating temporary blind spots in their sensor coverage. Communication networks experienced selective failures that isolated different sections of the base from each other. To the Korath technicians, it looked like random equipment malfunctions. They had no way of knowing that every failure was precisely timed and perfectly coordinated. Nick Johnson moved through the chaos like a phantom, his demolition charges placed with scientific precision at structural weak points throughout the fortifications. The explosions, when they came, would create maximum psychological impact while opening specific breach points for his teammates. Maya Rodriguez flowed through the defensive perimeter like liquid shadow. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to move between patrol routes with perfect timing, and her adaptive camouflage made her invisible even to the Korath's enhanced senses. She eliminated sentries with surgical precision, each kill designed to create fear without triggering immediate alarms. Turner waited until his team had softened the defenses, then began his own advance toward the command center. He moved through the Korath positions like death incarnate, his enhanced physiology allowing him to survive weapons fire that would have killed normal humans. The first sign that something was wrong came when a guard tower exploded in a pillar of fire that lit up the night sky. Then another tower vanished in a blast that shook the ground beneath the Korath soldiers' feet. Within minutes, explosions were erupting throughout the base as Nick Johnson's carefully placed charges detonated in sequence. But the explosions were just the beginning. As Korath soldiers rushed to respond to the apparent sabotage, they began encountering something far worse than bombs. Maya Rodriguez moved through their ranks like a harvesting machine, her enhanced abilities allowing her to kill multiple targets before any alarm could be raised. The soldiers who survived her attacks found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking from impossible angles with weapons they couldn't identify. Their thick exoskeletons designed to stop conventional arms offered no protection against her modified hands. Major Krikta tried to coordinate a response from his command bunker, but his communication systems kept failing at crucial moments. Orders would be transmitted only to be cut off before completion. Status reports would arrive claiming impossible things, describing an enemy that moved too fast to track and struck with inhuman precision. "Sir," reported a communications officer whose voice shook with terror, "we're receiving reports of multiple breaches. The enemy appears to be everywhere at once." Krikta studied his tactical displays, but the information made no sense. His soldiers were reporting attacks from all directions simultaneously, as if they were facing an army instead of the small force he knew had been hunting them. The truth was that 4 enhanced soldiers could accomplish more than most armies. They moved with perfect coordination, each supporting the others in ways that multiplied their individual effectiveness. They didn't just fight battles, they dissected enemy forces with surgical precision. General Thraktor watched the destruction of his fortifications from his command ship with growing horror. His cameras showed explosions and chaos, but no clear view of the enemy causing it. His soldiers' reports described attackers that seemed superhuman, moving faster than their eyes could follow and striking with impossible accuracy. "Deploy all reserves," he ordered desperately. "Concentrate everything on the command bunker. We make our stand there." But Turner was already inside the bunker. The enhanced soldier had penetrated the Korath's most secure facility by walking through the front entrance. His adaptive armor had fooled their sensors long enough for him to reach the inner chambers, and his enhanced reflexes had allowed him to eliminate the guards before they could raise an alarm. Major Krikta turned to find a figure standing in the doorway of his command center, and for a moment his insectoid brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The intruder looked almost human, but his eyes glowed with amber light and his movements had a predatory quality that triggered every fear instinct the Korath possessed. "What are you?" Krikta whispered. Turner tilted his head slightly, studying the alien officer like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. When he spoke, his voice carried no emotion, no anger, nothing that suggested he saw the Korath as anything more than an obstacle to be removed. "I am what humans become when mercy is not enough," he said quietly. The bunker fell silent except for the distant sounds of destruction, as Turner's teammates completed their systematic elimination of the Korath force. Within 2 hours, 50,000 alien soldiers had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing toward their landing ships. General Thraktor made the only decision that could save what remained of his invasion force. He ordered immediate evacuation, abandoning the conquest of Kepler 442 to save his ships from whatever nightmares the humans had unleashed. As the Korath fleet retreated into space, carrying reports that would spread across their empire like wildfire, the enhanced soldiers gathered in the ruins of the alien base. Their mission was complete, but their enhanced senses detected no satisfaction in the accomplishment. 3 days later, Elder Zarath emerged from the underground shelters, where her people had hidden during the invasion. The Valian leader walked through her devastated capital city, seeing the scars left by the brief but brutal occupation, but the Korath were gone. Somehow, impossibly, her people had been saved. She found Turner waiting for her in the ruins of the council chambers, his glowing eyes reflecting no warmth despite the salvation he had brought. The enhanced soldier stood perfectly still, like a weapon waiting to be used again. "You asked for mercy," Turner told her, his voice carrying an undertone of barely controlled violence that made the peaceful Valian step backward instinctively. "But mercy is not what you needed. You needed monsters, and monsters are what we sent." Zarath looked at this human who had saved her people, trying to understand what she was seeing. There was intelligence in those amber eyes, but also something cold and mechanical that had never existed in any natural creature. "What have you become?" she asked quietly.